Hey guys, Chris Fix here. Today I'm going to show you how to press out a ball joint using a ball joint press. I rented this ball joint press from Advance Auto, but any of the main parts stores, Pep Boys, Advance Auto, AutoZone, O'Reilly's, etc., they'll all rent it out for free. So I'm going to go over how to use everything. This C-clamp here is like the main thing. This is what's going to press down on your ball joint. So here's a ball joint, and when you press it in, this tool here is really good because it has this hole at the bottom, and this hole will allow the ball joint to get pressed out and pressed in without touching the stud here. For your new ball joint, you don't want to put pressure on the stud because that'll damage the ball joint. What you want to put pressure on is the shoulder and the top here. So let's start with taking the ball joint out of the car. So right now I have a lot of stuff apart on my truck, but here's where the ball joint is. On the lower control arm, that's the one I'm going to press out. This is the old one. This ball joint here is bad. It has upwards and downwards motion. So this needs to get replaced. Here's the new ball joint, and you can see it sits just like that. So this part is the part that it mates with on the bottom of the control arm, right here, this shoulder. To get this out, you press it downwards. So you're going to press it down, and it'll pop out. Most pressed ball joints will have a snap ring on the outside, so you have to take that off. You could use snap ring pliers, or you could use needle nose pliers. Be careful when you take these off, they have a tendency to go flying. So with the snap ring off, we're free to press this out. So now you want to evaluate your situation. In my case, I need to press it downwards. With this big C-clamp, this is the part that presses. So you want this part to push against the top. So now, I'll need something that'll push against the back of the control arm. Because you don't want to push against the ball joint, because then you'll just squish the ball joint and it'll get nowhere. You want to push against the control arm so you can force it out. So looking at our kit here, we need something that has some depth. Remember, we need something that is larger than that. So this is long enough, but unfortunately it doesn't fit around the ball joint. Remember, we need this piece to go around the whole ball joint and press against the control arm. Same thing with this. This actually sits right on the edge of the ball joint, which is what we need for when we're installing it, but this doesn't go around for when we're removing it. Okay, you see how this fits completely around the ball joint and doesn't touch it? And then the top part of this adapter will touch the control arm. We could easily press the whole ball joint out, so we'll use this adapter. Before we press anything out, there's a lot of grit and dirt and stuff in here. We don't want to get that in there, because then when we press it, it'll just scratch it up, and we don't want the control arm to get scratched up in there. We want it to be a nice smooth surface. So I'm using some brake clean, wire brush, and then I have compressed air. And that's an extra step you could take. You don't need to use the air though. Another thing you could do to help you remove this is get some penetrating fluid and just spray it around here. Let it pool up and absorb in, and that'll help you out when you're pushing it through. So here's an underneath view of the ball joint. Our attachment's going to go around the ball joint completely. So right here, the attachment is touching against the control arm, and we're not touching the ball joint at all. And then there's this hole down here which allows the stud to fall right through. So now you have an idea of how you're going to press this out. When you're pressing this, you want to make sure you line this up right in the middle, and you're pressing straight. You don't want to press at an angle. Let's take a look. You can see that's right in the middle. You can see the stud is right in the middle, so it'll go right through. You can also see that the attachment is touching the control arm and not the ball joint. None of the ball joint is actually being touched right now except for the top. So the top of this takes a 7/8 ratchet piece. I'm using a breaker bar, so it's nice and long. So now it's getting a lot easier to turn, and it should pop out any second. Oh, there we go. I put a box down here just so it wouldn't fall all the way. Penetrating fluid actually went through, which is good. So that's how you press a ball joint out. Now we'll just clean off this, clean out the inside, inspect, make sure there's no cracks in the control arm, no chips in here. But this looks really good, nice and smooth. So now I'll show you how to press one in. So here's the new ball joint, and what's going to happen is it's going to get forced in through here and pressed upwards. So since this is getting pressed upwards, we're going to have something that goes around the outside of this control arm so it doesn't touch this. And we're going to have something that goes on the shoulder here of this ball joint so it doesn't press against the rubber or the stud. Now we're back at our kit. We'll put this one back because we can't use that. Now we need something that touches the end here, but doesn't touch the inside. So, first try. This fits exactly on here, right on that shoulder. So we have this big opening here that we need to push downwards on. We don't want this to get touched. I have this cap here. It's kind of concave, so it won't touch the stud. You can see the stud in there, and that fits like that. So now we could press the ball joint up. Now we also need something that goes around this that won't touch this. So it needs to go completely around it and rest on the control arm. This piece right here goes completely around it and won't touch it when it's getting pressed up. So that's going to be our setup. Before we were forcing it out this way, now we'll be pressing it in this way. So on the ball joint itself it says mount inboard, and that's because there's a grease relief over here. So grease is going to come out. You want to mount this away from your brake rotors, so like that when you put it in here. So since we have to have this oriented this way, there's the long screw at the bottom, and there's nowhere near enough room to put the ball joint and everything and press it in. So what I'm going to do is going to use the jack and jack up the control arm. When you set up the jack, the further out you are, the better this is going to raise up. But you can't go too far. The middle here has to be clear so that you could have the tool right here. So the middle here is clear, and I have this piece of wood on the control arm, and it's going to lift it up. So now I get our cap, and I put our cap at the top, and that fits in like that. Now you want to make sure that this cap is centered so that the ball joint doesn't touch it. So that's centered right there. Now we'll snug our ball joint down. Good. So the difference for installation, you're using the shoulder of the ball joint to press up. And you have this cap here which gives the ball joint room to rise up. And this is pressing down on the control arm. We're still tightening with the screw side, which is why we flipped it upside down. Now we're going to tighten this down until we can't tighten it anymore. Okay. See how it's getting tight? That's about as much as I want to turn it. Now I'll back it off. We can see the snap ring will fit right in. There's no clearance issue with that. And when we look under the control arm, you can see that the shoulder is pressed all the way up against the control arm. And that's exactly what we want. The final step, put our split ring in. Make sure you press down on both sides. And it snaps in just like that. The new ball joint is good because it comes with this grease fitting, which allows you to put grease in. I would definitely want to try to find one with a grease fitting, because then you could force grease in here, grease up the ball joint when it gets older, and also force out any grime or grit that gets in here. This will increase the life of your ball joint dramatically. You don't want to tighten this down too much, just snug it. And you want this to face either that way or that way, so you could get a grease gun in here without taking the wheel off. Hopefully this video was helpful. If it was, give it a thumbs up. Also consider subscribing. I publish how-to videos weekly, and I answer all the questions and comments you guys leave below. If you have any questions, put it in the comment section below. I'll get to them. On the screen there will be videos that you could click, or you could find the links to those videos in the description below. The first video that you see right there will go through the whole process of changing a ball joint, not just the actual ball joint press, taking off the control arms, taking off everything else to get to the ball joint. And finally, if you use Facebook or Twitter, check out the Chris Fix Facebook and Twitter pages with the links in the description below.